interesting development that happened on Friday I wanted to bring to all of you. Let's put this up there on the screen. Senator Marco Rubio wrote an op-ed saying, quote, Amazon should face unionization drive without Republican support. The subhead really does kind of encapsulate Senator Rubio's argument, saying Amazon is waging a culture war against working class values, and it is not helping workers or our economy. Krystal, obviously, this one is really interesting because Senator Rubio is kind of trying to straddle old GOP and new GOP. He's like, unions are mostly bad. Adversarial relationships between workers and management is bad. But Amazon is worse. So in this particular case, I am with the workers. I have some complicated feelings about this one. I will say I logically don't think it makes a whole lot of sense because how are you supposed to set that standard? Which is that, so any company which is against like Republican values is one that is cool for unionization, whereas one that is not cool with unionization.
Right.
It's not like a consistent platform which can be actually applied. It's like you're either with labor or you're not with labor.
Right.
And so on that part, I have some problems with it. I think, and this is the way it's been explained to me, Ross Douthat had this observation as well, which I think is key. This is pretty much the only way you can be pro-union and not piss off the GOP donor base. So in that way, I think it maybe makes sense. It's like, no, guys, like we're not for unionization, but Amazon is bad because of critical race theory. And like, look, I mean, I think critical race theory is bad, but that doesn't mean that you should, look, more what it is when I tell you, everyone, that the culture war is king, this is what I'm talking about. And it's like even pro-worker policy, if it's going to evolve within the GOP, Rubio's op-ed shows that it must be couched only within the culture war and not within anything economic. So like I said, I have a lot of problems with this. But as somebody tweeted, I can't remember, it was like, look, when somebody supports your fight against the boss, even if it's a bullshit reason, they're like, just take it. So if you're an Amazon worker, I'm sure you don't probably care. But yeah, those are my full feelings.
They probably don't really care either way, to be honest with you. The best way I can describe this op-ed is extremely tortured. Like you can tell, just like you said, how he's trying to use these like conservative culture war buzzwords to fit in an argument in favor of the Amazon workers, but just in this one isolated instance, right? So he writes here, for decades, companies like Amazon have been allies of the left in the culture war. But when their bottom line is threatened, they turn to conservatives to save them. Republicans have rightly understood the dangers posed by the unchecked influence of labor unions, that make up like 10% of the workforce. Anyway, adversarial relations between labor and management are wrong. They were wrong for both workers and our nation's economic competitiveness. But the days of conservatives being taken for granted by the business community are over. He goes on to talk about like woke HR departments. I'm sure that has literally nothing to do with what these workers are thinking about when they're considering unionizing down in Alabama. And ultimately, he's obviously trying to walk this tightrope to keep from being totally cut off from the Republican like Chamber of Commerce and Koch aligned donor establishment. But they see through this. I mean, it doesn't matter to them if you wrap it in words about woke HR departments and, Amazon is uniquely bad or whatever. Like, they're going to see right through that, just like anyone else is, that they're not going to take your have it both ways thing. You're not really standing with workers. You're not also really standing by your corporate donors. And so basically you're satisfying no one.
The problem I have with it is that the logical implication is if, Amazon was a center-left company, then it would be allowed to keep doing, center-right company that would be allowed to keep doing what it's
if you're
doing.
like Hobby Lobby, then
and so picking sides within that, again, it's not a principled stance. I mean, you see this with police unions, right? People are like pro-union, except in this one case. And then they're like, public sector, talk to me when you say the same thing about teachers' unions. But I think that in this way, you need to be actually consistent in your principle, because otherwise, what does it become? It becomes culture war. And it's like, it's not going to help anybody. I actually think the worst thing that could happen to the labor movement is to have it become a culture war issue, right?
Yes,
they don't want that. Go ask those people. If you go and ask those people down in Alabama, in Bessemer, why they're trying to unionize. They want better working conditions.
Yeah, better wages, better working conditions, predictable time on, those sorts of bread and butter issues.
Culture war is the enemy of anybody who is trying to get anything substantive done in America. So from that perspective, I do not welcome this development, although I do suspect that the longer that you look, and in the next couple of years, the Republican pro-union agenda, if there is one, will look very much more like this one. And I think that just, again, tells you to about how everything must be couched within the culture war in order to make it a legitimate point of debate. And I expect if Trump were to ever be pro-union, it would probably be within this vein, too.
And here's the other thing is, like, it's just very, I don't want to overuse, this is like an overstatement, but it's this sort of authoritarian impulse of, like, I get to decide whether a union is good for you in your workplace or not. You end up with the government picking and choosing.
You don't want that.
Which workers get to decide if they want a union or not.
That's right.
That's a really weird and gross place to be, and very anti-conservative, by the way. We've talked here about the conservative case for unions, and there really is one, which is that, listen, even think about the minimum wage. If you have an economy that's largely unionized and you have workers who have actual power within their workplace, the minimum wage almost becomes irrelevant.
That's in Europe. That's literally how it works in Europe.
You see this in some Nordic countries in particular, where the wages are set by a market, but that market has to include workers having bargaining power. So you actually can reduce the need for federal government to be involved in every single workplace and setting these wages and having all these labor standards. That's like a kludge to deal with the fact that you have a labor market right now that has absolutely no power, and so corporations and bosses just get everything and everybody's absolutely crushed. So there is, in fact, a conservative case that you can make really clearly for unions. That's not what is being made here, and so, it makes it ultimately really weird. We'll see if any of these, I talked about the PRO Act last week.
Well, he's against the PRO Act. He actually comes out against it in the op-ed.
Right. So, and we'll see if any, there were 5 Republicans in the House that supported the PRO Act. Of course, he's not going to stand with that. You have to respect workers and let them choose for themselves within their workplace and actually make it a fair process so that they have a chance to stand up to their corporate bosses. On the other side of the ledger, Bernie Sanders using his powerful post as chair of the Senate Budget Committee to call Bezos, who hasn't responded yet, and one of those workers who's trying to unionize down in Bessemer, Alabama, to testify. This is focused on wage inequality, I believe is the focus of this panel. He announced a number of others that he's going to be focused on, convening people and trying to hold them to account and get better information as Senate Budget Chair of the Senate Budget Committee. So that is a positive development. We'll see what happens.
I hope it works out.
Tomorrow on Rising, friend of the show, DC Bureau Chief at The Intercept, Brian Grimm's going to be back. Also Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Policy Institute, Rachel Bovard, will be here for Team Rising.
It will be fun, and we have another great show planned. You guys don't want to miss it. Remember to hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss any of our videos. Don't forget to like and share as well, and we will see you all tomorrow.
Have a good one, guys.